Welcome to Data Architecture and Modeling with DataWharf. After a short slide deck presentation, we will go through a live demonstration of DataWharf. There are many definitions of data architecture and modeling. I will go through the latest iteration of it. Database architecture is a high-level approach that deals with the overall design of data architecture, systems, and processes. It defines the standard, policies, and practices that govern the collection, storage, retrieval, and use of data in an organization. Data architecture aims to ensure that data is managed in a consistent and coherent manner across the organization. Data modeling, on the other hand, is a more detailed approach that focuses on creating specific presentation and data architecture and relationship. It involves the creation of data models, which are diagrams or visualization presentation of data element, the attribute, the relationship between them. Data modeling helps to clarify the meaning and relationship of data elements and enable the creation and more accurate and efficient databases. In essence, data modeling is a tool used in the overall data architecture process in your organization. DataWharf will primarily focus on data modeling, but since data modeling is part of data architecture, it will help you overall architecture. DataWharf should be used and can be used to model all of your application regardless of the backend they have. Data modeling is usually differentiated in three different levels: conceptual data models, logical data models, and physical data models. Conceptuals are usually used when you present to your main stakeholders, try to explain the overall idea of what you want to implement. Often, conceptual models are created prior to any implementation. Logical models are often created with the intent to create a physical model. At that level, we usually include more specific information about your actual tables, your relationships, and up to the architect, they can go down to very specific object elements. Physical data model are actually normally targeting a particular backend. It is actual fields, actual names, actual indexes, actual enumerations. DataWharf is a little bit of both logical modeling and physical modeling. Data models or physical models loaded or created in DataWharf are not specific to a particular backend. They can be aware of it, but it can be applied to multiple backends. Currently, DataWharf is supporting PostgreSQL, MariaDB, MySQL, and MSSQL. As mentioned earlier, we have those three main modeling concepts. Conceptual and logical would fall into what we call in DataWharf projects. A project usually, again, exists prior to an application, or multiple applications can be done for a particular project, although sometimes projects can be created to document an already existing application. So in DataWharf, projects are a collection of models. Several models can exist about what you intend or how you intend to do your project. They can be separate models, that means different part of your project, or multiple possible models for the same issue. Models are made of entities, association, attribute, packages, and data types. Although all of these concepts can be renamed, some organization will use names like classes or entities. Each project can have their names, the names of the different elements of the models renamed. Custom access rights can be done to manage all the different levels of your project. On the other way, applications are detailed in DataWharf to actually handle logical/physical models, although most engineers would consider them to be physical models, where we would actually have a database. Those can be created by loading in an actual already existing database, or by actually creating all of the entities, all of the components manually. Or you would do a combination where you would load an initial one and then start to add to it. But again, the application in DataWharf are not specific to a particular backend. A quick run through here of a screen to explain the physical model. DataWharf is a mixture of a database itself and a visualization process, kind of like having a diagram and a database merged together, where the diagrams are not static, they're actually living documents. We will be documenting or actually presenting the modeling of DataWharf itself. So DataWharf was used to document itself. We'll also present another physical model, Pargilla, later on, which is quite well known in the PostgreSQL community. What makes DataWharf different than other modeling tools? First of all, DataWharf is 100% open source and free. It's a web application, not a desktop application, that can be accessed from any place where you are, wherever you grant access using any modern browsers. It is currently relying and supporting Bootstrap 5 and jQuery 3 and over. Most entities can also have an unlimited number of custom fields. You can create custom fields like, for example, who would be your specialist for different tables or entities, or any kind of binding that you would want to have with your own applications. Additionally, we can create tags for tables and columns. So if you want to group multiple tables or columns by different features in your application, you can do so. The search features in DataWharf are quite enhanced. In most applications, you would be limited to just searching on certain field names or table names. Here you can actually document all of your elements, tables, fields, enumerations, or if you go in the conceptual models, you have the same thing for your entities, your attributes, and so on. DataWharf basically will help you document what you already have and prepare what you want to do. This introduces a concept of a life cycle. You can plan what other elements you intend to add, and you can also plan termination of some of the elements. This is what I would call your life cycle. Additionally, to each of these application or models, you can have an unlimited numbers of diagrams, what would be also called visualization. When you make the diagrams, you don't just make free-form blocks. Those are actually coming directly from your entities. Relationships are driven from the models loaded in, from the schemas loaded in. So you are not really drawing the diagrams, you're consuming what you already have. But you have the freedom to specify how many of those tables, for example, you want to display and how they want them to be related, and you can reorganize the actual connectors between them. Again, diagrams are living documents. Each element of DataWharf has a unique URL. This is extremely important to understand since this will allow you to use DataWharf as an addition to any existing documents you have. In all of your documentation, your JR tickets, your Slack information, you can make a direct URL link to diagrams or any other elements you have. You can easily load in already existing database or comparing them to actual deployments. There's already a slide support of deployments that you want to keep track of. One of the main advantages, again, in DataWharf is you don't have to give access to your actual data. You can just have access to the metadata without its actual content. This is another reason why dealing with or registering multiple deployments will make it easy for multiple members of your teams to verify if their local schema matches what the schemas are specified or defined in DataWharf. DataWharf was actually created using an open source language called Harbor. So for those of you who might be Harbor developers, there's also an integration to an Harbor ORM. So if you add any tables, columns, field, indexes, enumerations, you can have it easily create the meta information necessary for your ORM to update its schema. DataWharf is also an enterprise feature application. Many of the other ORMs, not ORMs, uh, ERD systems available out there are usually focused on a single architect, which would then publish information out. DataWharf is really meant to be used actively by multiple team members. Some of them might be architects, some might be in developers working as architects, some of them might be support staff, some of them might be sales employees who would want to know what kind of new schemas we may want to support, or they may want to use the conceptual modeling when they are dealing with potential new customers to explain what their applications will do. So for that reason, we can create an unlimited numbers of users and link them to different projects and application with different access right to each of those elements. DataWharf can also be set up to use your company's single sign-on process. So you will not have to create different accounts for each of those users, although you will have to add actual access rights inside of DataWharf once you want to go beyond what is publicly available. DataWharf also has an export and import of its model and data dictionary. So if you want to, for example, have an engineer who creates a local definition of a model, or if you want to replicate and tweak one, you can go through its own import-export. This is also a very good way to archive an old project or to plan to share with other engineers on another network. DataWharf also has an API engine, which you can enhance to provide support to external applications. You can expect password and all information stored in DataWharf that will be used, and they will be all stored in PostgreSQL databases. So all access right restriction can be set up by your DBAs. DataWharf also is compatible with AWS RDS. So for those who are deploying your databases in RDS, this makes it very simple to actually deploy one or multiple instances of DataWharf. We also have support to Cyan Audit. Cyan Audit, since DataWharf is using PostgreSQL itself, will allow you to keep track of every edit and access, every edit that is being done to DataWharf's own databases. It is completely optional, but if you want to keep track about what is being changed where, you can do so easily. And it's currently time for a live demo. For the purpose of this demonstration, I will be running DataWharf locally. It will be up to you wherever you want to deploy DataWharf. You could deploy it as a Docker container running on, for example, your Kubernetes environment, or you can create a web server running Apache, for example, running DataWharf there as well. You can always see the current version of DataWharf that you're running, if in case you compile it, or you can actually see the information from the container that is provided through Docker Hub. For all additional information, please visit the repo. You can also access it by simply going to datawharf.org, which will redirect you to that location. When you create the application, you will have a default account and different password documented on the README file of the repo. One of the first steps you'll do is create either projects or applications. Most engineers will start with applications when they will load in data dictionaries. Data architects will usually go to project to create their conceptual or logical models. Additionally, you will be able to create an unlimited number of custom fields. Let's look, for example, at projects. Very short, small amount of information is being created here. By the way, I will have a project here created to document DataWharf itself. As I had mentioned, you can change the names of the different elements of what your conceptual and logical models are. If we go under applications, here I have quite a few applications. Again, we are in the setting applications. So this is only usually something that only a site administrator can do. You would create your applications. In this case, they will be called data dictionaries. You can set up your name. It should have a short link, which are going to be used part of your URLs, your links. and also how if this particular element can be removed or not. So there's some extra security provided here to not by mistake delete your applications or projects. And we can keep track of deployments. This will allow to compare your schemas against multiple deployed instances without having to have the user know how to get to those deployments. The deployments or the pathway to these deployments only has to be known by the instance of DataWharf that you have running. Again, this makes it much easier, for example, for tech support or sales staff to access the information without needing to know how to access your particular databases. Custom fields, as I mentioned, you can create an unlimited numbers of custom fields. So if you want to create, for example, who would be an owner of a table, you can create the concept of custom fields, and custom fields are applied to one or multiple application, one or multiple projects. Users, especially required if you're not using single sign-on, or even once you have single sign-on, they will be populated for you, then you can give them additional access rights. You have your standard settings, or if you have somebody with lesser access, meaning not a root administrator, you can actually specify the kind of access they would have to each of your applications and or each of your projects. It is for now a simple level of access, not detailed to every single elements. And of course, you can have every user change their password unless you're using a single sign-on. Let's look quickly at data dictionaries first. I will go through a documentation of DataWharf itself. The first screen that you will be usually brought to is the list of all the tables you have in your system. In this case, I actually documented DataWharf, the description of all the tables, and also I created some tags to be able to see groups of tables. In the search area, you can easily search by the content of any fields. So if you are looking, for example, of columns, in this case, the list of columns I'm describing myself, they have some description that could be used. They also have some enumerations that you're using. If you're in Postgres, they would be actually enums if you want to. If you're using MariaDB, MySQL, or MSQL, probably your enumerations are going to be integers, although they could be text as well. But in the search screen, you can, for example, search on any text that would be in their description. In that case, I would directly filter down the list of table by those descriptions. Once I go to columns, I would directly jump to that particular column, which makes it very fast and very quick to find if you already have a certain column used for your purpose. Or you can reset and see all the fields. After you do this quick review, what attracts people the most are the visualization parts. You can have an unlimited numbers of diagrams in DataWharf. By default, you would load an all tables. You can create a subset of tables, like for example, I only want to see the tables that DataWharf has to document itself. So I want to look at applications. I can see all the fields tied up to applications. And I already can see some color coding here because these are basically proposed fields, as you can see. You can go through namespaces, and now namespaces are not known by MariaDB or MySQL. MSSQL has the concept of like a DBO, database owner. You could consider them as namespaces, but multiple tables of the same name could exist in different namespaces. DataWharf was created to support all the features of Postgres, which inclusively has all the features basically of any other databases on the market currently. Once you go to namespaces, you can go to tables. And as you can see, I'm moving between these particular elements. Now, let's say you want to create a new diagram. I can call it demo. You can pick, for example, a table you want to start from. Let's say we go back again to applications. I currently create a single diagram with applications. Once you are, once you anchored yourself on a table, you can go to related tables and says, I'd like to see for this application the namespaces and the diagrams. I got namespaces and I've got diagrams. Let me move the whole thing down a little bit. And let's go to namespaces. And for namespaces, I'm going to add tables. Here are my tables. And on from tables, I will add diagram tables. As you can see, I can very quickly add nodes to your diagram. This would be an excellent way when you have a new, for example, Jira ticket or new work ticket to be given to one of your engineers. You could have the architects or your team lead, your tech lead, create a diagram to support all the work that has to be done so it can encapsulate the kind of tables, fields, and columns enumeration that we have to use. In this case, I wanted to see the project side of DataWharf. So, for example, let's go to another one, Pagila. I did create a few diagrams on Pagila. All tables. Oh, I got some other demos. Oh, come. You can, when you create a new diagram, you can make from scratch, or you can decide to duplicate a diagram. So if you already have a diagram that matches what you need, simply duplicate it and tweak it. By the way, every diagram has its own URL. As I mentioned earlier, this is something very critical for DataWharf to make it easy for you to include any references in your projects. I would highly suggest that any new work that you intend to do in your application should first be documented and created in DataWharf. Let's go back to documenting DataWharf itself. I can, for example, see enumerations used across the application. And we have the what I call delta load. So we could, for example, could compare one of those instances. In this case, I don't have access to this instance because it is actually an instance that would be running in Docker. So let's pick another one. Delta. It is matched. There are actually two differences here. The physical database does not have these columns. So this makes it again very easy for you to see if you have a deployment version, a production version, a sandbox version, a QA version, or multiple development versions. You could basically go through those. Or you can set up your own custom interactions. You would specify your backends. Now you may wonder, how come you can specify multiple backends if they all may have different field types? Well, when we go to, let's reset, go to applications, for example, and the columns, each fields have its own type of fields. It is a backend independent list of field types, which are then mapped in turn to a backend. Depending on whatever backend you loaded from last, you will have its native field type occur here. But by having its own backend independent field types, you can compare your set against backends. And by the way, when you do loads, you can also specify how you want your foreign keys to be loaded, either by actually restrictions you have in your backends, or if you have some naming conventions, I already have a few of them being listed here. Like some companies will use like a P for parent, to physical table, or F key for foreign key, or sometimes people will use a table name with underscore ID. Since this is an open source project, you're welcome to add more way of linking it, although most of the time, foreign key restrictions will work quite well. If I go to data modeling, and I want to look at the data modeling of DataWharf itself, I will have only one visualization, and it is to explain the concepts that you have in DataWharf. In the architecture modeling system, you actually have a side menu. So if you want to actually jump between different entities, you could see them more easily. Or if you have different data types, you can see them as well. Or you can hide your menu if you need more real estate. Currently, the intermapping, the application mapping is still under development, but this would be when you can compare or link two different physical models. So especially practical if you're upgrading your application from one schema to another. This is an upcoming feature. If you go to the repo, actually I already have it open here. You have a fairly extensive README file. We have an actual article with some documentation already for DataWharf itself. We have the instruction about how to run DataWharf in a Docker container. And also, if you don't have Docker, you're on a Mac, also you could use Lima instead. Although Docker Desktop is also available for Mac. It depends about what you intend to do. And upcoming to-dos are listed here. And changelog is very important for you to look at so you can actually see every time there are releases or new features being provided here as well. I hope that this quick demo of DataWharf will interest you in using it. And we will have additional, more technical-oriented presentation of DataWharf. Thank you so much.